My sister's perfectly manicured finger pointed straight at my chest, while 50 guests watched from the marble foyer of the Riverside Country Club. The champagne flute in her other hand caught the chandelier light as she leaned in close enough for me to smell her expensive perfume mixed with alcohol. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. You embarrass us, Morgan. You always have. The words hit like a physical blow, but what came next was worse. She turned to the crowd of our family's friends, business associates, and social circle members who had gathered for our father's 60th birthday celebration, and announced with a bright smile, "Everyone, please excuse my sister. She's going through one of her phases again." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that's somehow worse. Polite, dismissive chuckles that treated me like a mildly amusing inconvenience. Like a child who had wandered into an adult conversation. I stood there in my navy blue dress, the one I'd carefully chosen because it was conservative enough for their standards, but still made me feel confident. The same dress that had earned me compliments at 3 different business meetings that week, but under their collective gaze, it suddenly felt wrong, too plain, too ordinary for the sea of designer gowns surrounding me. My name is Morgan Chen, and I'm 32 years old. I run a successful digital marketing consultancy that I built from nothing, working 16-hour days in a studio apartment while eating ramen noodles and dreaming of something bigger. But standing in that opulent foyer, surrounded by crystal and gold leaf molding, none of that seemed to matter. The party had started 2 hours earlier, and I'd arrived precisely on time, carrying the gift I'd spent weeks selecting, a vintage, first edition of Dad's favorite biography, something personal and thoughtful. I'd found it through a rare book dealer in Chicago, and it had cost me more than my monthly car payment. When I handed it to him at the entrance, he'd barely glanced at it before setting it aside with the other gifts. "Morgan, sweetheart, you made it," he'd said, but his eyes were already scanning the room for more important guests. "The Hendersons are here, and I need to introduce you to Tom Morrison from the Country Club board. He's been asking about you." That should have been my first warning. Dad only introduced me to people when he needed something, usually a favor that required my particular skill set, but came with no credit attached to my name. I'd followed him through the crowd, watching him transform into the version of himself that everyone else got to see. Charming, attentive, genuinely interested in their lives and successes. With me, conversations were always brief, functional, focused on what I could do for the family rather than who I was as a person. "Tom, this is my daughter Morgan. She's the one I told you about. Great with computers and all that technology stuff." Computers and all that technology stuff. As if my company hadn't just signed a 7-figure contract with a Fortune 500 client. As if I hadn't been featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 2 years running. As if my technology stuff hadn't paid for the down payment on their new summer house in the Hamptons. Tom Morrison had shaken my hand with the kind of grip that suggested he was doing me a favor. "Oh, the tech girl. Helen mentioned you might be able to help with our website situation. We're having some issues with our online presence." Before I could respond, Dad was already nodding enthusiastically. "Morgan would love to take a look at it. She's always looking for little projects to keep herself busy." Little projects. My jaw had tightened, but I'd smiled politely and handed Tom my business card. He'd glanced at it briefly before tucking it into his jacket pocket without really reading it. The evening had continued in that vein. Introduction after introduction, where I was presented as the family's convenient tech support rather than a successful business owner in my own right. My sister Charlotte, meanwhile, glided through the party like she owned it, accepting congratulations on her recent engagement to a hedge fund manager and her new position at a prestigious law firm. "Charlotte's going to make partner before she's 35, I'd overheard Mom telling a group of her friends. "We're so proud of how she's turned out. Both girls are doing well, of course, but Charlotte has always been our little star." Our little star. At 28, Charlotte was hardly little, but she'd always been treated like the crown jewel of the family while I was more like a useful piece of furniture. Appreciated when needed, ignored otherwise. The breaking point came when I was standing near the dessert table, checking my phone for messages from a client whose campaign was launching Monday morning. It was important work, the kind that required attention even on weekends, but I was trying to be discreet about it. That's when Charlotte appeared at my elbow with two of her sorority sisters from college, both of whom had married well and now spent their days organizing charity galas and posting Instagram photos from their Pilates classes. "Oh my God, Morgan, are you working right now?" Charlotte's voice carried that particular tone she'd perfected in high school, half exasperated. Older sister, half amused observer of my various shortcomings. "Just checking on something quickly," I'd replied, slipping the phone back into my purse. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about," she'd continued, turning to her friends as if I weren't standing right there. "She can't turn it off. Ever. It's like she thinks the world will end if she's not glued to her phone for 5 minutes." Her friends had made sympathetic noises, the kind of sounds people make when someone's sharing a mildly concerning story about a relative's eccentric behavior. "I mean, I get that some people need to stay busy," one of them had said. "But there's a time and a place for everything, right?" "Exactly," Charlotte had agreed. "Like, we're at Dad's birthday party. Family should come first." The irony wasn't lost on me. Charlotte, who hadn't called Dad in 3 months before this party. Charlotte, who had forgotten his birthday last year entirely and had to be reminded by Mom. Charlotte, who had asked me to handle the catering arrangements for this very party because she was too swamped with wedding planning to deal with it. But I'd bitten my tongue, the way I always did, the way I'd been trained to do since childhood. Don't make waves. Don't cause drama. Don't embarrass the family. It was when I excused myself to go to the restroom that I'd run into Jason Reeves, Dad's business partner from 20 years ago. He'd been leaning against the wall near the coat check, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "Morgan, I was hoping I'd see you tonight," he'd said, his face lighting up in a way that felt genuinely warm. "I've been following your company's success. Impressive work on the Davidson Industries campaign. The ROI numbers were incredible." For a moment, I'd been thrown off balance. Someone at this party who knew about my actual work, who had done research, who was treating me like a professional rather than the family's pet tech support. "Thank you," I'd managed. That was a challenging project, but the team really came through. "I'd love to discuss a potential collaboration," he'd continued. "My current venture is looking for a strategic marketing partner, and your firm keeps coming up in our research. Would you be open to a coffee meeting next week?" Before I could answer, Charlotte had appeared beside us, her smile bright and territorial. "Jason, how wonderful to see you. I hope Morgan isn't bothering you with work talk." The dismissal in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Jason had looked between us, clearly confused by the dynamics he was witnessing. "Actually, I was the one who brought up business," he'd said diplomatically. "Your sister has built quite an impressive company." Charlotte's smile had faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Oh, Morgan and her little computer thing, she's always been good with gadgets." That's when something inside me had finally cracked. Not broken, cracked. Like the first fracture in a dam that's been holding back pressure for too long. "It's not a little computer thing," I'd said quietly. "It's a multi-million-dollar digital marketing firm with 43 employees and clients across 3 continents. Charlotte had blinked, clearly not expecting me to correct her. In the past, I would have let it slide, would have laughed along with her characterization of my career as a cute hobby. "Well, of course," she'd said, but her tone had sharpened. "I just meant—" "What did you mean?" I'd asked, and something in my voice had made Jason take a step back. That's when Charlotte had looked around, noticed that a few other guests had drifted closer to our conversation, and made her decision. Rather than back down or acknowledge what she'd been doing, she'd doubled down. "I meant that you're being dramatic," As usual, she'd said, her voice rising just enough to draw more attention. This is why you embarrass us, Morgan. You can't just let things go. You always have to make everything about you. The accusation had hung in the air between us, and I'd felt the familiar weight of every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every celebration where I'd been made to feel like I was the problem. Like my very presence was something they had to manage and apologize for. But this time, instead of shrinking back, instead of apologizing and changing the subject, I'd looked around at the faces watching us. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some clearly entertained by the family drama unfolding in front of them. And that's when I'd realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I wasn't the one who should be embarrassed. Charlotte stood there in her designer dress, having just publicly belittled her sister's successful career at their father's birthday party. And somehow I was the one who embarrassed the family? The revelation hit me like cold water. All those years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, when really I'd been the only one trying to maintain some dignity in the face of constant dismissal. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Jason was still standing there, looking increasingly uncomfortable as he realized he'd stumbled into a family minefield. Other guests were pretending not to watch while obviously hanging on every word, and Charlotte was waiting for me to do what I always did: apologize, laugh it off, find a way to smooth things over and make everyone else comfortable at my own expense. Instead, I took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. You know what, Charlotte? You're absolutely right. Her eyebrows had shot up, clearly not expecting agreement. I do embarrass you, I'd continued, my voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet foyer. But not for the reasons you think. That's when the crowd had really started to gather, drawn by the tone in my voice that suggested something significant was about to happen. Mom and Dad had appeared at the edge of the circle, both looking concerned but not yet alarmed. I embarrass you because I remind you of what you could have accomplished if you'd worked as hard as you expect everyone else to work for you, I'd said, and Charlotte's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I embarrass you because when people see us together, they realize that success isn't about who you know or what you inherited. It's about what you build with your own hands. The silence in the foyer was complete now, even the string quartet in the main ballroom seeming to play more quietly. And most of all, I'd continued, pulling out the business card Jason had given me earlier and holding it up so everyone could see the logo of his investment firm. I embarrass you because you just spent 5 minutes dismissing someone who's about to become my biggest client, in front of someone who's about to become my business partner. Jason's eyes had widened as he realized what was happening, but instead of looking uncomfortable, he'd started to smile. Morgan, Charlotte had said, her voice tight with warning. You're making a scene. Am I? I'd asked, looking around at the faces surrounding us. Or am I finally telling the truth? That's when Dad had stepped forward, his host's smile firmly in place, but his eyes hard with the kind of anger that came from having his carefully curated image disrupted. Girls, this isn't the time or place, he'd said in the tone he used when he wanted to shut down conversations without appearing authoritarian in front of guests. But I was done being managed, done being handled, done being treated like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. Actually, Dad, I think this is exactly the time and place, I'd said, and something in my voice must have warned him that this wasn't going to go the way these conversations usually went. Because for the first time in my 32 years, I wasn't backing down. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, and I could see Dad calculating his next move. He'd spent decades perfecting the art of family damage control, but this time was different. This time, I wasn't giving him the usual script to work with. Morgan, sweetheart, Mom interjected, appearing at Dad's shoulder with that particular smile she reserved for managing family crises in public. Why don't we step outside for some fresh air? It's getting quite warm here. It was the same tactic she'd used when I was 8 and had announced to a room full of dinner guests that Uncle Richard smelled like the cleaning lady's cigarettes. The same deflection she'd employed when I was 16 and had questioned why Charlotte got a new BMW for her birthday while I got a lecture about fiscal responsibility. But I was done being managed like a wayward child. I'm perfectly comfortable. Mom, I said, my voice steady. In fact, I think this is the most comfortable I've felt at a family gathering in years. Jason cleared his throat softly. Perhaps I should— No, please stay, I said, turning to face him directly. I think you should hear this. Since we're going to be working together, you should understand exactly what kind of family dynamic you're stepping into. Charlotte's face had gone from pale to red, her composure finally cracking. Morgan, stop it. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Let me ask you something, Charlotte. When was the last time you introduced me to someone without minimizing what I do for a living? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly scrambling for an answer. Or better yet, I continued, when was the last time you asked me about my work? About my life? About anything that didn't involve what I could do for you? The crowd around us was no longer pretending not to listen. This had become the evening's entertainment, and I could see phones being discreetly raised to capture what was clearly about to become family legend. That's not fair, Charlotte said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? 3 months ago, you called me at 11 p.m. on a Thursday because you needed help with your wedding website. You spent 45 minutes explaining every detail of your vision, every color scheme, every font choice. But when I mentioned that my company had just won the Henderson Group account, the biggest deal in our history, you said, "That's nice," and immediately started talking about your dress fittings. I could see the recognition dawning in her eyes, but she wasn't ready to acknowledge it yet. Last Christmas, when I tried to tell the family about our expansion into European markets, Dad cut me off to ask if I could fix Aunt Linda's iPad. And when I explained that I run a marketing firm, not a tech repair service, you laughed and said I was being precious about my job description. Dad's jaw tightened. He didn't like having his behavior dissected in front of his business associates and country club friends. You're twisting things, he said. We've always been supportive of your work. Have you? I asked. And suddenly the memories were flooding back with crystalline clarity. When I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with my MBA, you spent the entire celebration dinner talking about Charlotte's summer internship at Morrison & Associates. When I bought my first office space, you asked if I was sure I could afford the rent. When I hired my 5th employee, you suggested I might be expanding too quickly. The pattern was so clear now, I couldn't believe I'd never seen it before. Every achievement minimized, every success questioned, every milestone overshadowed by someone else's smaller but more socially acceptable accomplishments. And the money, I continued, my voice growing stronger as the truth poured out. Let's talk about the money, since that seems to be the only time I'm considered a valuable family member. Mom's eyes widened in warning, but I was past caring about family secrets. Charlotte's law school loans. Who co-signed those when she couldn't qualify on her own? Charlotte's face went ashen. This was clearly not information she wanted shared with her sorority sisters. The down payment on Mom and Dad's summer house. Who provided the gift that made that purchase possible? Dad's expression had gone from annoyed to genuinely angry. Morgan, that's enough. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. The country. Club membership fees when Dad's business was struggling 5 years ago. Who covered those to maintain the family's social standing? Jason was now looking at my family with undisguised fascination, clearly reassessing everything he thought he knew about our dynamics. Charlotte's engagement ring when her fiancé couldn't afford the one she wanted. Who made up the difference so she wouldn't be embarrassed in front of her friends? Stop, Charlotte whispered. But I couldn't stop. 20 years of suppressed Frustration and unacknowledged sacrifice were finally finding their voice. The medical bills when Mom had her surgery last year. Who handled those without being asked, without expecting repayment, without even receiving a thank you? Silence. Complete, mortified silence from my family, while the assembled guests looked on with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. But here's the really interesting part, I continued, my voice taking on the same analytical tone I used in business presentations. Every single time I provided financial support, it came with the same implicit message. Don't mention it. Don't make a big deal about it. Don't expect recognition or gratitude. I turned to address the crowd directly, treating them like the business audience they essentially were. Because acknowledging that the family's computer girl was actually the one keeping everyone afloat financially would have disrupted the carefully constructed narrative where Charlotte is the success story and I'm the helpful but slightly embarrassing little sister who's good with gadgets. Mom had gone completely white. Morgan, please. Please what, Mom? Please continue pretending that I'm not the financial backbone of this family? Please keep letting Charlotte take credit for introductions and opportunities that my network provided. Please keep smiling while you introduce me as your daughter who plays with computers instead of your daughter who built a company that employs more people than Dad's firm ever did. That last comment hit its mark. Dad's construction consulting. Business had never grown beyond 12 employees, despite 30 years in operation. My digital marketing firm had reached 43 employees in 5 years. Your daughter, I said, looking directly at him, who started with nothing but a laptop and a dream, who worked 100-hour weeks while Charlotte was pledging sororities, and going to charity galas, who built something real and substantial while everyone else was focused on appearances and social connections. Jason stepped closer, and I could see something that looked like respect in his eyes. Morgan, if I may, this actually makes me even more confident about our potential partnership. The kind of resilience and determination you're describing is exactly what we look for in business associates. Charlotte whirled on him, her mask of social grace finally slipping completely. Partnership? What partnership? She runs a little website design company. Jason's eyebrows rose. Actually, Chen Digital Solutions is one of the most innovative marketing firms on the West Coast. Their client retention rate is unprecedented, and their ROI metrics are industry-leading. That's not a little website design company. That's a sophisticated operation that could easily be scaled nationally with the right investment backing. The silence that followed was deafening. Charlotte looked like she'd been slapped. Dad's mouth actually fell open slightly. Mom just stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time in decades. Which brings us to the real reason I'm done. With this charade, I said, pulling out my phone and opening my email. 3 days ago, I received a formal acquisition offer from Peterson Digital Holdings. They want to buy my company for $12.5 million. The gasps were audible. Even the string quartet seemed to miss a note. $12.5 million, I repeated, letting the number sink in. For my little computer thing. For the hobby you've all been so graciously tolerating. Charlotte was now leaning against the wall, looking like she might actually faint. Dad was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that might have been respect mixed with complete bewilderment. But here's the thing, I continued. I turned them down. Because I don't want to sell. I want to grow. I want to expand. I want to build something even bigger and more successful. I turned back to Jason, who was now grinning openly. Which is why your offer to discuss partnership is so perfectly timed. I've been looking for the right investor to fund our national expansion, and from what I know about your track record, you might be exactly what we need. This is surreal, Charlotte said, finally finding her voice. How did we not know about any of this? It was such an absurd question that I actually laughed. How did you not know? Because every time I tried to tell you, you changed the subject. Every time I mentioned a success, you minimized it. Every time I celebrated a milestone, you made it about something else. I looked around the circle of faces. family, friends, business associates, social connections, all staring at me like I was a stranger. The real question isn't how you didn't know. The real question is why you never bothered to find out. Why were you so invested in seeing me as the family tech support that you couldn't recognize success when it was right in front of you? Mom finally found her voice. We thought you were happy with your little business. Little business, I repeated. 43 employees, 7-figure annual revenue, clients in 14 countries. But sure, Mom, my little business. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years seeking their approval, their recognition, their respect. I'd funded their lifestyle improvements and bailed them out of financial difficulties while they patted me on the head and told their friends I was good with computers. And now, standing in front of them with concrete proof of exactly how successful I'd become, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't want it. The sad part, I said, looking at each family member in turn, is that if you'd ever bothered to actually listen, to actually ask questions, to actually show interest in my life, you could have been part of this journey. You could have celebrated these wins with me instead of finding out about them like this. Charlotte had tears in her eyes now, but I wasn't sure if they were from shame or anger or simple shock. Instead, you chose to see only what fit your narrative. The dutiful daughter who would always be available to solve your problems and fund your dreams while staying quietly in the background. I turned to Jason and extended my hand. I'd love to continue our conversation about partnership. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? He shook my hand firmly. Absolutely. I'll have my assistant call your office to set something up. Perfect, I said, then looked back at my family one more time. And Charlotte? The next time someone asks you about your embarrassing sister, you can tell them she embarrassed you by becoming more successful than you ever imagined possible. While you were worried about maintaining appearances, I was busy building an empire. The weight of decades of dismissed achievements and minimized accomplishments was finally lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't apologizing for taking up space. The revelation hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle, and I watched my family process what they'd just learned. But as I stood there, feeling lighter than I had in years, my phone buzzed with a text message that would shatter even more illusions. It was from my business partner and best friend, Alex Rivera, who was supposed to be enjoying a quiet Saturday evening at home. Emergency. Need to call you ASAP. Found something disturbing in the Henderson Group files. My stomach dropped. The Henderson Group was our biggest client, the 7-figure deal I'd mentioned to Charlotte months ago. If there was a problem with that account, it could affect everything: my company's reputation, our expansion plans, the partnership discussion I'd just initiated with Jason. Excuse me for just one moment, I said to Jason, stepping slightly away from the group while keeping my voice low. I need to take this call. I dialed Alex's number, and she picked up on the first ring. Morgan, where are you? Are you somewhere private? I'm at my father's birthday party. What's wrong? I'm going to email you something right now. Check your phone, but don't react visibly. We may have a serious problem. My hands were trembling slightly as I opened my email app. The subject line read, Henderson Group, confidential, urgent. The attachment was a screenshot of an email chain, and as I read it, I felt the blood drain from my face. The emails were between Charlotte's fiancé, David Thornfield, and someone at Henderson Group, dated 3 weeks ago. The thread was discussing alternative marketing options and more established firms with proven track records. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was Charlotte's name appearing throughout the conversation as the contact who can provide insight into Chen Digital's actual capabilities and limitations. My sister had been talking to our biggest client, behind my back, providing insight into my company's limitations. Morgan, are you there? Alex's voice sounded far away. I'm here, I managed. How did you get these? Henderson's IT department accidentally CC'd me on an internal email. When I called to let them know about the error, their communications manager seemed confused about who was supposed to be handling their account going forward. That's when she mentioned they'd been approached by Thornfield and Associates about potentially transitioning to a more suitable marketing partner. Thornfield and Associates, David's family firm. The one that specialized in traditional advertising for old money clients who preferred newspaper ads and country club networking to digital innovation. There's more, Alex continued. I did some digging after that phone call. David Thornfield has been systematically reaching out to 3 of our other major clients over the past month. He's been using his engagement to Charlotte as credibility, claiming he has insider knowledge about our company's instability and suggesting they might want to consider more established alternatives. I was staring at my sister across the foyer, watching her dab at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief while our mother comforted her. Charlotte, who had spent years dismissing my career as a hobby, had been actively working to undermine it. And Morgan? Alex's voice was grim. The Henderson Group meeting you have scheduled for Monday? They want to discuss transitioning the relationship. I think they're planning to fire us. My legs felt unsteady. The Henderson Group contract wasn't just our biggest deal. It was the foundation of our expansion plans. Losing it would mean laying off staff, scaling back operations, potentially having to reject the partnership opportunity with Jason that I'd just announced so confidently. I need to go, I told Alex. Don't do anything yet. Let me handle this. I hung up and looked around the foyer with new eyes. The birthday party, the timing, the way Charlotte had been so eager to publicly humiliate me in front of Jason and Dad's business contacts, it all suddenly made sense. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was sabotage. I walked back to where my family was clustered, their conversation stopping abruptly when they saw my expression. Is everything all right? Mom asked. You look pale. Actually, no. Everything is not all right. I turned to face Charlotte directly. Tell me about David's recent business development activities. Charlotte blinked, clearly confused by the change in topic. What do you mean? I mean his outreach to Henderson Group, and Castillo Industries, and Morrison Financial. I named our 3 biggest clients, watching her face carefully for any reaction. The flush that crept up her neck told me everything I needed to know. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Really? Because I just got off the phone with my business partner, who received some very interesting emails by mistake. Emails discussing how Thornfield and Associates might be a more suitable choice for companies currently working with Chen Digital Solutions. Dad stepped forward, his host instincts finally kicking in as he realized this conversation was about to get much more serious. Girls, perhaps we should— No, Dad. We're not moving this somewhere private. We're finishing it right here, in front of everyone. Because apparently public humiliation is how this family handles business. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshot Alex had sent me. Charlotte, would you like to explain to everyone how your fiancé has been using your name and your supposed insider knowledge to steal clients from my company? The silence was absolute. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Charlotte's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. You're being paranoid. David wouldn't what? Wouldn't use his connection to this family to advance his own business interests? Wouldn't exploit private family conversations to damage a competitor? I turned to address the crowd, many of whom were business owners themselves and would understand exactly what I was describing. For those of you who don't know, what my sister's fiancé has been doing is called tortious interference with business relationships. It's not just unethical, it's illegal. Jason had moved closer, his expression now deadly serious. Morgan, are you saying your sister provided confidential information about your business to a competitor? I'm saying my sister spent years convincing me she wasn't interested in my work. that it was too complicated for her to understand, too technical for her to care about. And apparently, she was lying. She understood it well enough to help her. Fiancé identify vulnerabilities he could exploit. Charlotte was shaking now, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. That's not... I never meant for... You never meant for what, Charlotte? You never meant for me to find out? You never meant for it to work? Or you never meant for me to be successful enough that sabotaging me would actually matter? Mom looked stricken. Surely this is all a misunderstanding. Is it? Let me read you something. I pulled up the email thread on my phone. This is from David Thornfield to Henderson Group's marketing director. Given my insider perspective through family connections, I can confirm that Chen Digital is experiencing significant internal instability. Charlotte has mentioned concerns about her sister's ability to maintain client relationships as the company grows. The gasps from the crowd were audible, but I wasn't finished. And here's my personal favorite. The family consensus is that Morgan may be in over her head with accounts of this magnitude. Charlotte suggested that a more traditional approach might better serve Henderson's long-term interests. I looked up from my phone to find Charlotte crying openly now, but I felt no sympathy. Only a cold, clear anger that was sharpening my focus, like a laser. Family consensus, I repeated. Interesting phrase, since I was never consulted about this consensus. Were you, Mom? Dad? Did you know that Charlotte was representing your opinions to potential clients about my professional capabilities? Dad's face had gone red with what I hoped was embarrassment rather than anger. Of course not. We would never, wouldn't you? Because this explains so much. The lack of interest in my successes, the dismissive comments about my work, the way you've all consistently minimized my achievements in public settings. Were you all just waiting for me to fail so you could say you saw it coming? That's not fair, Mom protested. We've always been proud of you. Have you? Because this email thread suggests that Charlotte has been telling people the opposite, that the family has concerns about my abilities, doubts about my competence, worries about my stability. I turned back to Charlotte, who was now sobbing into her handkerchief. How long, Charlotte? How long have you been feeding David information? About my business? She couldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. He just asked questions sometimes, and I thought it was normal curiosity. Normal curiosity about profit margins? About client acquisition costs? About our expansion timeline and investment needs? Her silence was enough. And let me guess. These casual conversations intensified right around the time I started talking about the acquisition offer, didn't they? Right around the time it became clear that my little computer business was actually worth millions? Jason was now looking at my family with undisguised disgust. This is industrial espionage, corporate sabotage. If what you're describing is accurate, your sister and her fiancé could face serious legal consequences. Could they? I asked, genuinely curious. Because I'm certainly planning to explore every legal option available to me. Dad finally found his voice. Morgan, surely we can work this out within the family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, my family just tried to destroy my business. My sister has been conspiring with her fiancé to steal my clients and damage my reputation. What exactly is there to work out? I looked around the circle of shocked faces, guests who had come to celebrate a birthday and instead witnessed the complete implosion of family relationships. You know what the truly brilliant part is? While you were all so busy dismissing my work as unimportant, Charlotte was simultaneously providing detailed intelligence about it to a competitor. You can't have it both ways. Either my business is the insignificant hobby you've always claimed it is, in which case Charlotte's corporate espionage was pointless, or it's successful and valuable enough to be worth sabotaging, in which case your years of dismissiveness were calculated cruelty. The logic was inescapable, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. But here's what you didn't count on, I continued, my voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. You didn't count on me being smart enough to build redundancies into my business model. You didn't count on me having the kind of client relationships that couldn't be destroyed by whisper campaigns and behind-the-scenes manipulation. I turned to Jason with a smile that probably looked predatory. And you definitely didn't count on me meeting a potential investor who specializes in helping companies weather competitive attacks and emerge stronger than before. Jason nodded grimly. Corporate sabotage is actually something we've dealt with before. It's more common than people think, especially when family businesses are involved. Family businesses, I repeated, savoring the phrase. Yes, I suppose that's exactly what this is, isn't it? A family business where one family member provides intelligence to help another family member's business destroy a third family member's business. The evening that had started with Charlotte calling me an embarrassment was ending with the discovery that she had been actively working to make her prediction come true. But instead of feeling devastated, I felt something unexpected. Relief, because now I knew exactly who my family really was and what they were really capable of. And that knowledge, painful as it was, would make my next decisions much easier. The relief I felt was crystallizing into something much more powerful: clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I could see the situation exactly as it was, without the fog of family loyalty or the desperate hope that things would somehow get better. I looked at Jason, who was watching the family drama unfold with the analytical expression of someone who had seen corporate warfare before. Jason, I need to ask you something directly. Does this situation change your interest in a potential partnership? He didn't hesitate. Actually, it increases it. What I'm seeing here is someone who's built a successful business despite active sabotage from people who should have been supporting her. That level of resilience and capability is exactly what we look for in investment opportunities. Charlotte's head snapped up. Investment opportunities? Jason Reeves, I said, turning to face her directly, is the founding partner of Meridian Capital Ventures. They specialize in scaling mid-size companies for national expansion. Their portfolio includes 12 companies that have achieved successful exits with an average return of 400%. I watched the information sink in, watched Charlotte realize that the man she'd been dismissing as just another party guest was actually one of the most influential venture capitalists on the West Coast. The partnership we were discussing, I continued, involves a potential investment of $15 million to fund Chen Digital's expansion into 15 new markets over the next 3 years. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. $15 million. Not for an acquisition, but for growth capital. The difference was crucial. I would retain ownership and control while gaining the resources to become a major national player. Dad's mouth had fallen open again. Mom was gripping her champagne flute so tightly I thought it might shatter. $15 million, Charlotte whispered. That's the initial investment, Jason clarified. If the expansion targets are met, we're prepared to provide additional capital for international expansion. We're talking about a potential total investment of $50 million over 5 years. The silence was deafening. These were numbers that dwarfed anything our family had ever discussed. Numbers that transformed me from the family's convenient tech support into something they'd never imagined. A major player in my own right. But I wasn't finished. The discovery of Charlotte's betrayal had triggered something in me, a calculating coldness that I'd never felt before. If my family wanted to play corporate games, I would show them what corporate warfare actually looked like. Alex, I said, calling my business partner back while everyone listened. It's me. I need you to implement the Henderson Group contingency plan. Yes, tonight. I could hear Alex's surprise through the phone. Are you sure? That's a pretty aggressive move. I'm sure. Also, I need you to prepare cease and desist letters for David Thornfield and Charlotte Chen Thornfield. Tortious interference, breach of confidentiality, and conspiracy to damage business relationships. Charlotte made a small choking sound. And Alex? Call our attorney. I want to explore filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding David's ethics violations. Using privileged family information to damage a competitor's business relationships could constitute professional misconduct. I hung up and looked around the circle of stunned faces. Contingency plan? Dad asked weakly. Every successful business has contingency plans, Dad. When I suspected Henderson Group might be wavering, and yes, I suspected it before tonight, I began developing alternative strategies. I turned to Jason. One of the things that might interest you about Chen Digital is our crisis management protocols. We don't just react to problems. We anticipate them and prepare multiple response scenarios. Jason nodded approvingly. Crisis preparedness is actually one of our key evaluation criteria. Too many companies fold at the first sign of adversity. The Henderson Group contingency plan, I explained to the group, involves immediately implementing our client diversification strategy. Instead of relying on 3 major clients for 60% of our revenue, we're accelerating our acquisition of 15 smaller clients who will collectively provide more stable, diversified income. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. I have meetings scheduled with 5 potential clients this week, 2 more next week, and 3 additional proposals going out on Monday. By the time Henderson Group officially terminates our contract, we'll have already replaced their revenue stream. Charlotte was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. How did you plan all this so quickly? I didn't plan it quickly. Charlotte, I've been developing multiple business scenarios for months. The difference between successful entrepreneurs and people who think they understand business is that we don't put all our eggs in one basket. We prepare for every possible outcome. I turned back to Jason. Which brings me to my formal proposal. I'd like to accelerate our partnership timeline. Instead of a gradual expansion over 3 years, I want to implement an aggressive growth strategy that will make Chen Digital the dominant digital marketing firm on the West Coast within 18 months. Jason's eyebrows rose. That's ambitious. What kind of timeline are you thinking of? I want to sign the partnership agreement within 2 weeks. I want to begin client acquisition immediately. And I want to use the current situation as a case study in competitive resilience that we can leverage in our marketing materials. The audacity of the proposal was clear to everyone listening. I wasn't just responding to the sabotage, I was using it as fuel for explosive growth. Charlotte's betrayal has actually provided us with valuable intelligence about our competitors' strategies, I continued. We now know exactly how traditional firms are trying to position themselves against digital marketing companies. We can use that information to develop more effective counter-strategies. I looked directly at Charlotte. So, in a way, you've actually helped us. Your industrial espionage has given us insights into Thornfield and Associates' client acquisition, methods that we couldn't have obtained any other way. Her face went white. Morgan, I never meant— I know exactly what you meant, Charlotte. You meant to damage my business enough that David could steal my clients. You meant to undermine my reputation enough that I would be forced to accept smaller contracts and lower margins. You meant to keep me in the box you've always put me in. Successful enough to help fund the family lifestyle, but never successful enough to overshadow your own achievements. The accuracy of my analysis was written all over her face. But here's what you didn't understand about business, about real business. Not the kind of social networking that passes for business in your circles. When you attack a strong company, you don't weaken it. You force it to become stronger. I turned to address the entire crowd, shifting into the presentation mode that had closed dozens of major deals. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing tonight is a perfect example of how market forces actually work. When Thornfield and Associates decided to target Chen Digital's clients, they made a crucial strategic error. They assumed we were vulnerable because we were growing quickly. Jason was now grinning openly, clearly enjoying the impromptu business lesson. Instead, their attack has forced us to accelerate our diversification strategy, strengthen our client relationships, and identify weaknesses in our business model that we can now address proactively. By Monday morning, Chen Digital will be a more resilient, more competitive company than it was this morning. I looked at Dad, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is how business actually works, Dad. This is what strategic thinking looks like. This is why your daughter's little computer business is about to become a major player in a multi-billion-dollar industry. The transformation was complete. In the span of 2 hours, I had gone from the family's embarrassing tech support to the architect of a major business expansion, and I had done it in front of witnesses who would spread the story throughout their business and social networks. Charlotte, I said, turning to face my sister one final time, I want to thank you. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Thank you for showing me exactly what kind of person you really are. Thank you for revealing that the family dynamics I've been trying to navigate for 32 years were never about love or loyalty. They were about control and exploitation. The hope died in her eyes. And thank you for forcing me to stop seeking approval from people who were never capable of recognizing value when it was right in front of them. I turned to Jason and extended my hand. Shall we discuss the details of our partnership over dinner tomorrow? I have some ideas about accelerated growth strategies that I think will interest you. He shook my hand firmly. I'll have my team prepare a preliminary term sheet. Based on what I've seen tonight, I think we can move very quickly on this. Excellent. I looked around the foyer one last time, taking in the shocked faces of family members and guests who had just witnessed the complete transformation of family dynamics. And to everyone else, I said, raising my voice slightly to address the crowd, I hope you've enjoyed this evening's entertainment. Consider it a preview of what happens when you underestimate someone for too long. I started walking toward the exit, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Dad? Happy birthday. I hope the rest of your celebration goes smoothly. I'm sure Charlotte and David will have lots to discuss with you about their business strategies. The last thing I heard as I walked out of the Riverside Country Club was the sound of Charlotte crying and Mom frantically trying to explain to confused guests what had just happened, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was already planning my next moves, already thinking about the phone calls I would make tonight and the meetings I would schedule for Monday morning. For the first time in my life, I was playing offense instead of defense, and it felt like coming home. I had barely reached my car in the country club's parking lot when my phone exploded with calls. The first was from Charlotte, then Mom, then Dad, then numbers I didn't recognize. Probably guests from the party who had gotten my contact information and wanted to discuss what they'd just witnessed. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I sat in my car for a moment, feeling the weight of what had just happened. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but underneath it was something else, a profound sense of freedom that I'd never experienced before. My phone buzzed, with a text from Jason. Incredible performance tonight. Can we meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. instead of evening? I want to move on this immediately. I was typing my response when someone knocked on my passenger window. It was Charlotte, her makeup streaked from crying, her designer dress wrinkled from the emotional chaos of the evening. I rolled down the window but didn't unlock the doors. Morgan, please, we need to talk. Do we? Because I think everything that needed to be said was said in there. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I actually laughed. How was it supposed to happen, Charlotte? Was there a version of corporate sabotage that I was supposed to find acceptable? She glanced around the parking lot nervously. Other guests were starting to leave, and several were clearly watching our interaction with interest. Can I get in? Please? Just for 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door. Charlotte climbed in, immediately filling the car with her expensive perfume and the tension of someone who knew they were in serious trouble. Morgan. I swear I didn't know David was doing anything illegal. He just asked questions about your business sometimes, and I thought, you thought what? That sharing confidential information about my company with a competitor was normal pillow talk. I didn't think of it that way. He made it sound like he was just curious, like he wanted to understand what you did so he could be supportive. Supportive. I repeated the word like it was foreign. Charlotte, David's firm specializes in traditional advertising. They're direct competitors with digital marketing companies. What exactly did you think he was going to do with detailed information about my client base, my pricing structure, and my expansion plans? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I think, she said finally, I think part of me wanted him to prove that you weren't as successful as you claimed to be. The honesty of the admission was like a slap. I had expected denials, excuses, deflections. I hadn't expected her to actually acknowledge her motivations. Why? I asked. Why did you need me to be less successful? Tears started flowing again. But these seemed different, less performative, more genuine. Because it was easier, she whispered. It was easier to believe that you were exaggerating your success than to admit that I'd wasted my entire 20s playing social games while you were building something real. The confession hung between us in the car's small space. It was easier to tell myself that your business was just a hobby than to face the fact that while I was planning charity galas and shopping for the perfect engagement ring, you were creating jobs for 43 people and generating millions in revenue. I felt something I hadn't expected, a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her insecurity had cost me. So you decided to help David destroy what I'd built, because it was easier than dealing with your own feelings of inadequacy? I didn't think it would actually hurt you. I thought maybe if he could prove that some of your clients weren't completely satisfied, you'd realize you needed to slow down, be more realistic about your goals. More realistic. The phrase was so condescending, so perfectly encapsulating everything that had been wrong with our family dynamic for years. Charlotte, my goals weren't unrealistic. I achieved them. I exceeded them. The only thing that was unrealistic was my expectation that my own family would celebrate my success, instead of trying to sabotage it. My phone was ringing again. This time it was Alex. I answered immediately. Morgan, we have a situation. Henderson Group just called. They want to schedule an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss concerns that have been raised about our company's stability. I put the phone on speaker so Charlotte could hear. What kind of concerns? They mentioned receiving information from reliable sources, suggesting that Chen Digital might be experiencing internal financial difficulties and leadership instability. They want to review our contract terms and discuss potential modifications. Charlotte's face went ashen as she realized the full scope of what David had been doing. Alex, implement the full Henderson response protocol. I want financial audits, client testimonials, and performance metrics prepared by Sunday night. Also, prepare a presentation about our recent acquisition offer and our upcoming partnership with Meridian Capital. The Meridian partnership is confirmed? As of tonight? Yes. Jason Reeves is moving forward immediately. Holy shit, Morgan, that's incredible. How did you— Long story. I'll call you tomorrow with details. For now, just prepare everything we discussed. We're going to turn this attempted sabotage into the best marketing opportunity we've ever had. I hung up and looked at Charlotte, who was staring at me with something that might have been awe. You're really going to fight this, she said. I'm not going to fight it, Charlotte. I'm going to win it. There's a difference. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad. Morgan, you need to come back inside. We need to discuss this as a family. No, Dad, we don't. Because what happened tonight proved that we're not a family in any meaningful sense of the word. We're a collection of people who share DNA and have been pretending to care about each other for 32 years. That's not fair. We love you. Love isn't a feeling, Dad. It's a behavior. And your behavior, all of your behavior, has consistently demonstrated that you love the idea of me more than you love me as a person. Charlotte was crying again, but I was beyond caring about her tears. You love the version of me that pays for things and fixes problems and stays quietly in the background. You love the version that provides tech support and doesn't ask for recognition. But the version of me that's successful and independent and refuses to be managed, that version embarrasses you. We just want what's best for the family, Dad said, his voice strained. No, you want what's comfortable for the family. And those are two very different things. I could hear voices in the background. Mom trying to calm guests, other family members asking questions about what had happened. Dad, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to listen carefully. As of tonight, I am no longer participating in family financial arrangements. I won't be covering emergency expenses, co-signing loans, or providing bailout funding when your investments don't work out. Morgan, you can't just, I can, and I am. Furthermore, any attempt by David or Charlotte to interfere with my business relationships will result in immediate legal action. I have documentation of their activities, and I'm prepared to use it. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Finally, I won't be attending family events where I'm expected to smile politely while being insulted, dismissed, or undermined. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be based on mutual respect and genuine interest in my life and achievements. You're being dramatic, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, finally demanding basic respect after 32 years of providing it without receiving it seems pretty reasonable. I hung up before he could respond. Charlotte was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're really going to cut us off completely? I'm going to set boundaries that should have been set years ago. If you can't respect those boundaries, then yes, I'll cut you off completely. But we're family. Family is supposed to support each other, Charlotte. Family is supposed to celebrate each other's successes. Family is supposed to have each other's backs when the world gets difficult. I started the car, signaling that this conversation was over. What you and David did wasn't family behavior. It was corporate espionage, and if you want to play in the corporate world, you'll be held to corporate standards. Charlotte opened the car door but paused before getting out. What if David stops? What if he calls Henderson Group and explains that there was a misunderstanding? I looked at her for a long moment, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time who she really was underneath the designer clothes and social connections. Charlotte, the damage is already done. David has compromised his professional ethics. You've revealed your true feelings about my success, and the family has shown me exactly where I stand in their priorities. She stepped out of the car, then leaned down to the window. I really am. Sorry, Morgan. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo corporate sabotage. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. And sorry doesn't change the fact that when you had to choose between supporting your sister and advancing your fiancé's business interests, you chose his interests without hesitation. I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving Charlotte, standing in the parking lot under the country club's elegant lighting. As I drove home, my phone continued buzzing with calls and messages. But for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to answer them, wasn't worried about managing other people's feelings or smoothing over family conflicts. Instead, I was thinking about Monday morning's meeting with Henderson Group, about the partnership terms I would negotiate with Jason, about the strategic moves that would transform this crisis into the foundation of unprecedented growth. The family that had spent decades trying to make me smaller had inadvertently forced me to become larger than they could have ever imagined, and the best part was, I was just getting started. Sunday morning arrived with 57 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 14 voicemails. I turned off my phone without reading or listening to any of them. Instead, I made coffee, sat on my balcony overlooking the city, and spent 3 hours reviewing the Henderson Group files while mentally preparing for what I knew would be the most important week of my professional life. At 9 a.m. sharp, I turned my phone back on and called Jason. "Morgan, good morning. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, and I want to move even faster than we discussed." "How fast?" "I want to have preliminary term sheets ready by Wednesday. I want to announce the partnership by Friday, and I want to use Monday's Henderson Group meeting as a case study in crisis management that we can present to other potential clients." The audacity of the timeline should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt exactly right. "I love it. What do you need from me?" "Full financials, client contracts, employee agreements, and a detailed breakdown of your crisis response protocols. Can you have all of that ready by Tuesday morning?" "Consider it done." After hanging up with Jason, I called Alex and filled her in on the accelerated timeline. By noon, we had a war room set up at the office with 6 team members working on different aspects of the Henderson presentation and the Meridian Partnership documentation. That's when the real resistance began. The first wave came through intermediaries. My cousin Rachel called around 2 p.m. "Morgan, your mom is beside herself. She's been calling everyone in the family, trying to understand what happened last night." "What's to understand?" "Charlotte and her fiancé attempted corporate sabotage." I responded appropriately. "But cutting off the entire family? Don't you think that's extreme?" It was fascinating how quickly the narrative was being rewritten. 24 hours ago, I was the family embarrassment who needed to be managed and minimized. Now, suddenly, I was the unreasonable one for refusing to accept betrayal with a smile. "Rachel, let me ask you something. If someone who wasn't related to you had done what Charlotte and David did, what would you call it?" She was quiet for a moment. "I'd call it corporate espionage." "And how would you respond to corporate espionage?" I'd probably involve lawyers." "Exactly. The fact that Charlotte is my sister doesn't make what she did less illegal or less damaging to my business." The second wave came from family friends who had witnessed the confrontation at the party. Mrs. Henderson from the country club called to check on me. "Morgan, dear, I just wanted to make sure you're all right after last night. It seemed like there might have been some misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. As if Charlotte's systematic betrayal was simply a communication error. "I'm perfectly fine, Mrs. Henderson. Actually, I'm better than fine." Last night's revelations helped me understand some business challenges I'd been facing, and I'm now positioned to address them strategically. Well, that's good, I suppose, but surely family comes first. Perhaps there's a way to work things out quietly? The assumption that I should prioritize family harmony over business integrity was exactly the kind of thinking that had kept me trapped in their dysfunctional dynamic for years. Mrs. Henderson, with respect, family relationships that require me to accept illegal interference with my business aren't relationships worth preserving. By Sunday evening, the pressure campaign had escalated significantly. Dad called from Mom's phone, probably hoping I'd answer if I saw her name on the caller ID. "Morgan, this has gone far enough. You're destroying the family over a business misunderstanding." "I'm not destroying anything, Dad. I'm protecting my business from people who were trying to destroy it. David made a mistake. He's young. He got carried away with competitive instincts. But Charlotte loves you. She would never intentionally hurt you." The gaslighting was so complete, so systematic, that I almost admired its thoroughness. Charlotte's months of providing confidential information to a competitor was being reframed as David's youthful mistake and Charlotte's misguided love. "Dad, Charlotte spent months telling David detailed information about my business operations, my client relationships, and my expansion plans. She did this knowing he was a competitor. That's not love. That's betrayal." "You're being too harsh. Families forgive each other. Some things don't deserve forgiveness. Some things deserve consequences. What about all the years we supported you? What about family loyalty?" The question was so backwards, so completely inverted from reality, that I actually laughed. Supported me? Dad, I've financially supported this family for 5 years. I've covered emergency expenses, co-signed loans, paid for medical bills, and funded family vacations. The only support I ever received was being told I was too sensitive when I asked for basic respect. Monday morning arrived with a different kind of pressure. I was in the office at 6 a.m., finalizing the Henderson Group presentation, when I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from David Thornfield's law firm, sent to my business email address. Dear Ms. Chen, it has come to our attention that you have made false and defamatory statements regarding our client David Thornfield and his business practices. These statements, made in a public setting, have caused significant damage to Mr. Thornfield's professional reputation. We demand that you immediately cease making such statements and issue a public retraction. Failure to comply will result in legal action for defamation and business libel. Additionally, we understand you have threatened legal action regarding alleged corporate espionage. Any such action would be frivolous and could result in sanctions against you and your firm. We strongly advise you to reconsider your current course of action and work toward an amicable resolution of this matter. I read the email 3 times, then forwarded it to our attorney with a note. Please prepare a response. Also, please accelerate our preparation of the tortious interference lawsuit. The legal threat was clearly designed to intimidate me into backing down, to make me worry that fighting back would be too expensive and too risky. A year ago, it might have worked. But the person who had stood in that country club foyer and demanded respect wasn't intimidated by legal posturing from a firm that was trying to cover up corporate espionage. Alex walked into my office holding a coffee and a grim expression. I just got off the phone with Henderson Group. They want to move today's meeting to 3 p.m. and they're bringing their legal counsel. Their legal counsel? For a marketing contract review? That's what I thought. I think David's been busier than we realized. The pieces were falling into place. David wasn't just trying to steal my clients. He was trying to create legal liability that would make my company too risky for other businesses to work with. Alex, I want you to call Jason immediately. Tell him about the legal threat and ask if Meridian has in-house counsel who can attend this afternoon's meeting. You want to bring our potential investor to a client crisis meeting? I want to show Henderson Group exactly what kind of support Chen Digital has, and I want Jason to see how we handle business warfare in real time. By 2 p.m., our conference room looked like a legal war room. Jason had arrived with Meridian's general counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wells who specialized in competitive business disputes. Our own attorney, Michael Torres, had prepared a comprehensive response to David's legal threats. And Alex had assembled a presentation that would demonstrate exactly how systematic David's interference had been. The Henderson Group delegation arrived precisely at 3 p.m. Their marketing director, their general counsel, and, to my complete lack of surprise, David Thornfield himself. Ms. Chen, David said as he entered the conference room, his voice smooth and confident. I hope we can resolve this misunderstanding professionally. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Thornfield. There's documented evidence of tortious interference with business relationships, and there are legal consequences for that behavior. Henderson's marketing director, Jennifer Walsh, looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should focus on the business relationship between Henderson Group and Chen Digital. Absolutely, I said, standing and moving to the presentation screen. Let's talk about our business relationship. And let's also talk about how competitors have been trying to interfere with that relationship using confidential information they shouldn't have had access to. I clicked to the first slide, which showed Henderson Group's campaign performance metrics over the past year, results that were objectively excellent by any industry standard. These are your actual results working with Chen Digital. 37% increase in qualified leads, 42% improvement in conversion rates, and a return on marketing investment of 412%. Jennifer nodded. Yes, the results have been strong. So when someone contacted you to suggest that Chen Digital was experiencing internal instability and leadership problems. Did you think to check these results against their claims?" David's confident expression flickered for just a moment. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a timeline of David's communications with Henderson Group alongside Charlotte's family dinner conversations, where she had discussed confidential business information. This timeline shows a clear pattern of industrial espionage. Mr. Thornfield systematically gathered confidential information about Chen Digital's operations through his relationship with my sister, then used that information to approach our clients with targeted competitive offers. Henderson's legal counsel was taking notes rapidly. Industrial espionage was a serious legal matter, and she clearly recognized the implications. Furthermore, I continued, clicking to the next slide, Mr. Thornfield's firm lacks the capabilities to actually fulfill the promises he made to you. Thornfield and Associates has never managed a digital marketing campaign of Henderson Group's size and complexity. I looked directly at David. Which raises the question, what was your actual plan if you succeeded in stealing our clients? Were you planning to subcontract the work back to firms like ours, marking up our services while providing no actual value? The silence in the room was profound. David's face had gone red, and I could see him calculating whether to continue his confident facade or attempt damage control. Patricia Wells, Meridian's counsel, spoke for the first time. "For the record, Mr. Thornfield, Meridian Capital takes industrial espionage very seriously. Any attempt to interfere with our portfolio company's business relationships will be met with immediate and comprehensive legal action." Jennifer Walsh looked between David and me, clearly realizing she had been caught in the middle of something much more serious than a simple competitive dispute. "Ms. Chen," she said carefully, "I think Henderson Group needs to reassess this situation. We may have received information that was incomplete. You received information that was obtained illegally and provided by someone with a clear conflict of interest," I corrected. "The question now is whether Henderson Group wants to be associated with that kind of business practice." The meeting that David had orchestrated to damage my reputation was instead exposing his own unethical behavior to our mutual client and my new business partner. But I wasn't finished yet. The final slide of my presentation showed Chen Digital's new partnership with Meridian Capital and our expanded service offerings. "Henderson Group now has a choice," I said, looking directly at Jennifer. "You can continue working with a company that has consistently delivered exceptional results and is now backed by one of the most successful venture capital firms on the West Coast. Or you can switch to a firm that has demonstrated a willingness to engage in corporate espionage and lacks the resources to match our performance." The choice, presented so starkly, was obvious. David Thornfield had walked into the meeting expecting to deliver a killing blow to my business. Instead, he had just witnessed the complete destruction of his own credibility and the strengthening of the client relationship he had tried to undermine. The war wasn't over, but this battle was mine. 6 months later, I stood on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Capitol building, looking out over the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that had once seemed impossible to reach. The view was breathtaking, but what took my breath away wasn't the height. It was the realization of how far I'd traveled from that country club foyer where Charlotte had called me an embarrassment. The past 6 months had unfolded like a masterclass in how quickly things can change when you stop accepting less than you deserve. The Henderson Group meeting had ended with Jennifer Walsh apologizing for the miscommunication and David Thornfield walking out in barely contained fury. Within a week, Henderson had not only renewed their contract, but increased their budget by 40%, citing their confidence in Chen Digital's crisis management capabilities and strategic partnership potential. The legal threats from David's firm had evaporated once our attorney filed a detailed response, documenting the industrial espionage and threatening criminal referrals. Turns out, most lawyers prefer not to defend clearly unethical behavior when the evidence is overwhelming. But the real transformation had been internal. Jason and I had signed the partnership agreement 18 days after Dad's birthday party, with terms that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Meridian's investment had allowed us to expand into 12 new markets, hire 67 additional employees, and establish Chen Digital as the fastest-growing marketing firm on the West Coast. The numbers were staggering. Revenue had tripled. Client retention was at 94%, and we'd been featured on the cover of Business Week with the headline, "From Family Crisis to Corporate Success: How Personal Boundaries Create Professional Growth." But the most satisfying change wasn't financial, it was psychological. I had stopped seeking approval from people who were incapable of recognizing value when they saw it. My assistant knocked on the glass door of my new corner office. "Morgan? Your 2 p.m. is here." I turned from the window to see Charlotte standing in the doorway, looking smaller somehow than she had 6 months ago. She was impeccably dressed as always, but there was something different in her posture, something that suggested humility rather than entitlement. "Thank you, Sarah. Please hold my calls for the next 30 minutes. Charlotte entered my office slowly, taking in the expansive space, the city views, the wall of awards and recognitions that had accumulated since our partnership launch. "This is incredible, Morgan. Really incredible." "Thank you." I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. "Please, sit down." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 6 months of family estrangement settling between us. "I saw the Business Week article," she said finally, "and the Forbes interview, and the TechCrunch feature about your expansion into international markets. I'm surprised you kept track." "I've kept track of everything." Her voice was quiet, almost defeated. "Every success, every award, every milestone. I've been following your company's growth like a fan." The admission was unexpected. I had assumed the family was pretending I didn't exist, the way they always did when faced with uncomfortable truths. "Why?" I asked. Charlotte took a deep breath, clearly preparing for a conversation she'd been rehearsing for months. "Because I needed to understand what I'd tried to destroy. I needed to see exactly how successful you really were, how much damage David and I could have caused." She pulled out her phone and showed me a spreadsheet. "I've been tracking your company's growth metrics, your employee count, your client acquisitions. Do you know that if David's sabotage had succeeded, you would have lost approximately $2.7 million in revenue over the past 6 months?" The specificity of her research was staggering. She had clearly spent considerable time understanding the business she had once dismissed as a hobby. "I also calculated the number of jobs that would have been lost if your company had failed. 43 employees then, plus their families, plus the additional 67 you've hired since then. David and I nearly destroyed the livelihoods of over 100 people because I was jealous of your success." The conversation was taking a direction I hadn't anticipated. I had expected denial, excuses, requests for forgiveness. I hadn't expected a detailed financial analysis of the damage she could have caused. "Charlotte, why are you here?" She set down her phone and looked directly at me for the first time since entering the office. "I'm here because I need to tell you something I should have said 6 months ago. You were right about everything. About the family dynamics, about the way we treated you, about the fact that we were exploiting your generosity while dismissing your achievements." She paused, collecting herself. "But more than that, I need to tell you that what happened at Dad's birthday party was the best thing that could have happened to this family. That was definitely not what I had expected to hear. David left me 3 months ago," she continued. "The legal pressure from your case, the damage to his professional reputation, the loss of potential clients who found out about the industrial espionage. His business collapsed, and when it became clear that he couldn't rebuild using the same tactics that had gotten him into trouble, he decided he didn't want to be associated with the Chen family drama anymore." I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly suppressed by the memory of everything they had put me through. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry. Be proud. Because when David left, he told me exactly what he thought of our family, and it was illuminating. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her purse. He said, and I'm quoting directly, "Your family is a collection of underachievers who resent success and mistake drama for importance. The only one with any real talent was Morgan, and you were all too threatened by her to recognize it." The words hung in the air between us. He was right, Morgan. We were threatened by you, not because you were different, but because you were better. You were more hardworking, more innovative, more successful, and more generous than any of us had ever been. Charlotte unfolded the paper, which appeared to be handwritten notes. After David left, I spent a lot of time thinking about our family dynamics. I made a list of every time we minimized your achievements, every time we asked for your help without offering support in return, every time we made you feel like you were the problem. She held up the paper, which was covered in small, dense handwriting. This list is 4 pages long, Morgan. 4 pages of documented instances where we treated you like a convenient resource rather than a family member. The thoroughness of her self-examination was unexpected, but I wasn't ready to be impressed by her newfound awareness. "What do you want from me, Charlotte?" "Nothing," she said, and something in her voice suggested she meant it. "I don't want anything from you. I'm here to give you something." She reached into her purse and pulled out a certified check. "This is $47,312. It represents every financial contribution you made to our family over the past 5 years. Medical bills, loan cosigns, emergency expenses, gift supplements, everything I could document." I stared at the check, genuinely speechless. "There's also interest calculated at prime rate plus 2%, because that's what you would have earned if you'd invested the money instead of giving it to us." "Charlotte, I can't." "You can, and you will. Because this isn't about forgiveness or reconciliation. This is about acknowledging that what we did was wrong and that you deserve to be compensated for it." She set the check on my desk between us. "I got a job, by the way. A real job, not an internship at a friend's firm. I'm working as a junior associate at Morrison & Lee, making $42,000 a year and learning what it actually means to earn your success instead of inheriting it." The transformation in her attitude was remarkable, but I was still processing the implications of everything she'd told me. "What about Mom and Dad?" Charlotte's expression darkened slightly. "They're struggling with the new reality. Dad's business lost 3 major clients after word spread about the industrial espionage situation. Apparently, other companies don't want to work with someone whose family engages in corporate sabotage. And Mom? Mom has been telling everyone who will listen that you're going through a phase and that family relationships will eventually return to normal. She doesn't understand that normal was the problem." Charlotte stood up, smoothing her dress in a gesture that was familiar from childhood. "But I understand it now. Normal was a system where you provided financial and emotional support while receiving criticism and dismissal in return. Normal was unsustainable, and you were smart enough to recognize that before the rest of us." She moved toward the door, then paused. "I know you don't owe me anything, and I'm not asking for a relationship. But I want you to know that watching you build this company, seeing you succeed on this scale, has taught me more about self-respect and personal boundaries than 28 years of family dynamics ever did." She opened the door, then looked back one final time. The sister who embarrassed us? She became the most successful person any of us have ever known. And the family that called her an embarrassment? We're the ones who should be embarrassed, by how long it took us to recognize what we had, and by how badly we handled losing it. After Charlotte left, I sat in my office for a long time, looking at the check she'd left on my desk. The money wasn't important. Chen Digital's success had made me financially independent beyond anything I'd dreamed of 6 months ago. But the gesture represented something unprecedented in our family history: accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. The new investor wants to discuss the Asia-Pacific expansion. Are you ready to take Chen Digital Global? I was ready. More than ready. I looked out at the city skyline, thinking about the girl who had stood in that country club foyer 6 months ago, desperate for her family's approval and willing to accept crumbs of respect. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly what she was worth and refused to accept less. The family that had tried to shrink me down had inadvertently forced me to grow beyond their comprehension. The sister who had called me an embarrassment had helped me become someone who would never again be embarrassed by her own success. And the business that they had tried to destroy through sabotage had become something neither they nor I had ever imagined possible. A global enterprise built on the foundation of refusing to accept disrespect. I picked up Charlotte's check and walked to my assistant's desk. Sarah, please have the accounting process this as a donation to the Women in Technology Scholarship Fund. Full amount, with a note that it's in memory of family relationships that should have been better, and in honor of professional relationships that actually are. As I walked back into my office to prepare for the board meeting that would launch Chen Digital's international expansion, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. The people who matter don't make you smaller to make themselves feel larger. They celebrate your growth because they understand that success isn't a zero-sum game. And the people who do try to make you smaller, they reveal exactly how small they really are. I was done being small. I was done accepting small things. And I was definitely done with people who thought my success was something to be embarrassed about rather than something to be celebrated. The view from the 42nd floor was spectacular, but the view from the top of my own life was even better. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.